Lights out.
Kneel before now.
You know, sometimes you'll see a combo or a setup, and you'll immediately think to yourself, I would not be able to replicate this. This is simply not within the scope of my ability. And then you'll just, try to replicate it for fun. And then you'll fail like 80 times in a row without making any progress, and you'll just drop the setup. And then you'll start coping by saying that the setup wasn't all that great to begin with, and that you don't really need to be able to replicate it. That was the case with the first setup of the Rose combo. Now, the Rose combo was initially called the Anguish combo, and it only consisted of the first setup and another setup by Beowulf and Akuma. It was an incredibly short combo, and I never once, not even once, I never once did the full thing correctly. I would do the first setup correctly a lot, but the second setup was so incredibly difficult, so tedious, that I completely gave up on it, and I gave up on the combo. I uploaded a half-assed version that really wasn't to my liking, and I only, I had about a few attempts where it was kind of okay, that final setup. One of them was, you can see it right here. But aside from that, I was like, no, this combo no, I'm giving up on it. It's even more difficult than the Hell combo. But then eventually, I, discovered a few setups, and I merged them together into the Rose combo. So, the current Rose combo that you're seeing is a product of, four players, I don't know. So, the first setup is by Edwin Zhu. It's from his legendary Doppelganger combo video. This video has inspired so many people. Like, you have Bode, or LZ2, the guy that made the Meltdown combo video. He literally thanked Edwin Zhu in the description. You can even tell that he kind of used a lot of his setups, but he modified them. He even used the same stages. Connie Mio, the guy that made the Alpha combo video, a lot of people were inspired by Edwin Zhu's Doppelganger video. The combo mad. So, the first setup is by Edwin Zhu. The second setup is, I would say, from Beowulf and Akuma, but not really. This is entirely improvised by me. I made this setup myself, kind of. Maybe somebody used it at some point, but I really couldn't tell you. The third setup is by Beowulf and Akuma. It's from one of his combos. And the final setup, which is, in my opinion, the highlight of the combo, the coolest setup here, it's a setup by Moonwhite Fox, an incredible, a criminally underrated Vergil main. I think he's Chinese. So I think Edwin Zhu is also Chinese, so I think all these people are Chinese, basically. So that's basically who I'm crediting for this combo. That's who I took inspiration from. And now, let's start analyzing the combo. But before that, let me explain a little something about Vergil's air taunt once again. What I'm about to say applies to most of my newer combos, so basically, you know how Vergil has an air taunt, right? He throws these 3 mini summon swords at the enemy, and they launch the enemy into the air, essentially. Yeah, so that's his default air taunt. So when you press the taunt button in the air, that's what he'll do. However, this only works if your style rank is below S. So if it's A, B, C, or D, or no rank, you will get this air taunt. However, if your style ranking is S, or double S, or triple S, instead of this air taunt, where he throws these miniature summon swords, he will do this. So this DMC3 air rave, essentially. But this only works if your style ranking is S or higher, right? So double S, triple S. And it only works if you have the Yamato equipped or if you have the Mirage Edge equipped. So even if your style ranking is S or higher, if you have Beowulf equipped, you will be able to use the normal air taunt with the summon swords. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt in your combo, which is the case with, you know, like the Amethyst combo, the Nocturnal combo, the Rose combo, all these combos. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt, what I recommend for this combo, before you even start this combo, go, like, if you have SS Sion's Collaborative Trainer, which I assume that if you're watching this video and if you're trying DMC combos, you have this trainer, go into Taunt Selector, go to Vergil, and replace both his air taunt and his S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. Right? That's what you want. This will make it so that even if your style ranking is not S, you can use this air taunt, like, you know, the S rank air taunt. Also, you know how even if your style ranking is S, if you have Beowulf equipped, Vergil will use the normal air taunt, you know, with the summon swords. Well, this facilitates things, right? Because if you go into Taunt Selector, you can use the S rank air taunt even with Beowulf equipped, which is what I did in both the Rose combo and the Nocturnal combo. And the Amethyst combo, actually. So in all of these combos, I am using the S rank air taunt, even though I have Beowulf equipped, which shouldn't be possible. You could even say that this is kind of like cheating, but it facilitates things, because this way, you don't have to switch to the Mirage Edge or the Yamato just so you could use this one taunt, right? It definitely facilitates things, and that's what I recommend using. Another option, and I didn't even know this was a thing up until recently, is you have the option to enable always S rank air taunts. So this will make it so that you always have this S rank air taunt available. However, if you have Beowulf equipped, you're gonna have the normal air taunt. But this facilitates things. My go-to method is to use the taunt selector and replace both the air taunt and the S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. So you gotta be on the right side with the Yamato, and you use Rising Star. And now you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, is what I would normally say, but that's not what you want to do. So with this combo, you want something else. After you're done with Rising Star, you switch to Beowulf immediately, you let go of the lock-on, and now you enemy step, you jump cancel, and you press forward, and then you summon the Doppelganger, okay? You summon the haste Doppelganger, the one who's in sync with you and mimics all your commands immediately. Now, you might be wondering why that is, because normally, under any normal circumstance, you just summon the Doppelganger and that's it. It's because you want the Doppelganger to face away from the enemy. You want him to face the other side of the map, and the same applies to Vergil. If you summon the Doppelganger normally without using enemy step and letting go of the lock-on and pressing forward, what's going to happen is Vergil and the Doppelganger will both face the enemy. But this way, they're not facing the enemy, they're facing the other side of the map, if you know what I mean. Like, you can see this here. You can see the difference, basically. So you want this because later, if you don't do this, if you summon the Doppelganger the normal way, it will cause problems with Aerial Rave B, mostly. So just trust me on this. A lot of combos, a lot of Doppelganger combos require you to use this method. But this is the first time that I've used it myself. And of course, if you're on the left side, you do the same thing, but you hold backward. Like, you hold back instead of forward. So anyway, Rising Star. While using Rising Star, you switch to Beowulf and you let go of the lock-on. You enemy step, so you jump, and you press forward, and you hold it, and you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger. Okay? That's it. Now, what you want to do is, and you gotta pay very close attention. I am very sorry. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this setup all that well. This is why I've been avoiding this analysis for so long, because it's very timing intensive. It is all about timing, and things like that are very difficult to explain. So what essentially happens here is Vergil uses Starfall. While using Starfall, the Doppelganger uses Aerial Rave A. Then Vergil uses Trick Up. He uses the S-Rank Air Taunt. The Doppelganger blows the enemy away towards Vergil with the last hit of Aerial Rave A. And then Vergil uses Air Stinger with the Mirage Edge to blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger. After that, the Doppelganger uses Aerial Rave B, Vergil uses Starfall, and then Kick 13. The Doppelganger pins the enemy to the ground with the final hit of Aerial Rave B, and Vergil basically uses Kick 13 and Rising Sun, the final two kicks to launch the enemy back into the air. But, of course, the way Aerial Rave A works is you just mash the attack button like a maniac, and you blow the enemy away with the last hit of Aerial Rave A. That's how it works. Aerial Rave B is you press the attack button 2 to 3 times, and you use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, then you make a pause, and then you just continue mashing like a maniac. Alright, that's how it works. So, with that being said, let's go over this again. So, you let go of the lock-on, of course, and use Starfall, and you mash like a maniac while using Starfall. So here you can see, I press the attack button 3 times, and before pressing the attack button the 3rd time, I switch to the Mirage Edge. I use Trick Up, to propel myself into the air. I lock on, and I use the S-Rank Air Taunt. And I keep mashing the attack button. I press it one more time, and Vergil's Doppelganger blows the enemy away towards Vergil. At this point, I switch to the Mirage Edge, and I use Air Stinger, which is right plus attack button, to blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger. And now that the enemy is close to the Doppelganger, you gotta gauge this perfectly. You press the attack button 2 to 3 times so that the Doppelganger can catch the enemy with the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. And while doing that, you switch to Beowulf and you use Starfall. So essentially you use Starfall, which is pressing the attack button once, but you press the attack button 2 to 3 times while using Starfall so that the Doppelganger can use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B with the Yamato, right? And then you make a pause after you hit the ground with Starfall, because this pause is required for Aerial Rave B. And at this point you can, but you don't have to, switch the Doppelganger's mode from haste to normal. Absolutely optional, by the way. You don't have to do it at all. It's additional inputs. It might you don't need to do it, okay? You don't have to, but whatever. So, like I said, after Air Stinger, you blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger. Once the enemy is close enough to the Doppelganger, you use Starfall and you press the attack button 2 to 3 times so that the Doppelganger can use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. After hitting the ground, you make the pause. You can switch the Doppelganger's mode, and now after this pause, use Kick 13, which is back plus forward plus holding the attack button. As you guys already know, Kick 13 has 2 versions. Back plus forward plus attack button, that is just Kick 13, and back plus forward plus holding the attack button, where Vergil does these 2 additional kicks that will launch the enemy into the air. What you want to do here, after the pause, after Starfall, is you want to press back plus forward and mash the attack button a few times, and as the Doppelganger is about to finish the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B, you press and hold the attack button, alright? And then the Doppelganger will pin the enemy to the ground, and Vergil will use the 2 launching kicks of Kick 13 to launch the enemy into the air, and you deactivate the Doppelganger now. So, again, like I said, you press back plus forward and you mash the attack button. Why do you have to mash the attack button? It's so that the Doppelganger can do the rest of Aerial Rave B. And at some point, you gotta hold the attack button so that Vergil can use the 2 final kicks of Kick 13. During the mistakes and issues section, I'll explain this in more detail, so yeah. Okay, so after launching the enemy into the air with Kick 13, you now have the most redundant thing ever. This is the definition of superfluous. It's a redundancy, it's filler. Sometimes in my combos, I will use what I refer to as filler. And sometimes, most of the time, I'll use this filler because I don't have a creative way of introducing the next setup. Because every combo is a string of multiple setups, and sometimes I'm like, how do I string these together in an organic way? And I just think of something, and it's like, okay, you know what? Let's just use this, you know? So after doing this, I use Lunar Phase, right? After Lunar Phase, I switch to the Mirage Edge and I use Homebreaker. After this, I use Million Stab, right? And after this, I switch to the Yamato, I go into my Sin DT, you gotta charge it, and I use Rising Star, and I release the lock-on. And this is where the second setup starts. Now, again, like I said, this is a redundancy. You could, nothing is stopping you from just summoning the haste version of the Doppelganger after Kick 13, after launching the enemy into the air. What I wanted was to give myself more time to think, really. I was kind of overwhelmed a little bit, and I was like, wait, what comes next? Fuck it, you know, and this is kind of the result of that. So the second setup, after using Rising Star, you let go of the lock-on, right? You switch to the Mirage Edge, and you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger. Now you use Trick Up, which is why you gotta let go of the lock-on in the first place, and you immediately lock on again. Now you use Air Stinger with the Mirage Edge, which is right plus attack button, but you make sure to press the attack button twice during Air Stinger. The reason being, you want the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. Aerial Rave B is attack button, pause, and then you press the attack button 2 more times or you mash. It really depends, right? It doesn't matter. So, like I said, Air Stinger, you press right plus attack button. Vergil uses Air Stinger, the Doppelganger uses the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. Now you make a pause after Air Stinger, you switch to Beowulf, and you use Starfall. So you press the attack button once to use Starfall. But almost immediately, you cancel Starfall with Trig Down. You pressing the attack button once to use Starfall will cause the Doppelganger to use the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B, because that is only 1 hit, basically. So, you use Starfall, the Doppelganger uses Aerial Rave B, you cancel Starfall with Trig Down, and now you use Kick 13, which is back plus forward plus attack button, but you keep mashing the attack button, alright? And now the Doppelganger will use the rest of Aerial Rave B, he will pin the enemy to the ground, and at this point you start holding the attack button, and Vergil will use the full Kick 13, and he will once again launch the enemy into the air, basically. And of course, after the Doppelganger has finished Aerial Rave B, you deactivate him. And now that the enemy has been launched into the air with Kick 13, you once again summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, and you let go of the lock-on, and you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you do the same thing, but not really. Wait a little bit, and you use Trick Up. You know, so that's why you gotta let go of the lock-on, so you can use Trick Up. After using Trick Up, you lock on again, and you use Air Stinger with the Mirage Edge, which is right plus attack button. But you gotta press the attack button twice while using Air Stinger. The reason for this is you want the Doppelganger to use Aerial Rave B. Aerial Rave B is attack button, pause, and then you just keep mashing the attack button, right? Or while you press it 2 more times, doesn't matter, right? So, like I said, you basically use Trick Up, use Air Stinger, right plus attack button, plus attack button. So you press the attack button twice while using Air Stinger, and now you make a pause. After you're done with this pause, you switch to Beowulf, and you press the attack button 1 more time to use Starfall. This will cause the Doppelganger to use the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B, because that is the 3rd hit of Aerial Rave B. And now that you've hit the ground with Starfall, you switch to the Yamato and you press the attack button 1 more time, and this will cause the Doppelganger to use the final hit of Aerial Rave B. And now you immediately press back plus forward plus attack button so that a Vergil can use Void Slash. And now the Doppelganger will pin the enemy to the ground, and before they reach the ground, Vergil catches them with Void Slash. So it's really incredibly simple. Basically, the Doppelganger simply uses aerial rave B. And all you gotta do is you gotta press the attack button twice during air stinger, then you make a pause after air stinger, then you press the attack button one more time during starfall so that the Doppelganger can use the roulette spin, and immediately after touching the ground you press the attack button one more time, and then you press back plus forward plus attack button. This will cause the Doppelganger to use the final hit of aerial rave B and Vergil to use Void Slash to catch the opponent. Of course, at this point, after catching the enemy with Void Slash, you deactivate the Doppelganger and you also deactivate your Sin DT, only to immediately summon the haste version of the Doppelganger once again. So the second and third setup are incredibly similar. It's basically the same principle, the only difference being in the third setup, Vergil uses Void Slash after Starfall. And in the second setup, Vergil cancels Starfall by using Trig Down and Kick 13, right? They're not the same, but the principle is the same, right? Okay, and now we finally have the final setup, the most interesting part of the combo. After catching the enemy with Void Slash, you deactivate your Sin DT, right? And you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger again. And before he's fully formed, while he is still a blur, you use Rapid Slash, right? To cut through the enemy. If you wait for the Doppelganger to fully form, he will use Rapid Slash with you. So it's really important that you cancel the Doppelganger summon by using Rapid Slash before he's fully formed. Alright? Now that you're done with Rapid Slash, not when you're done. Once you're on the other side, you input the Heavy Rain Blades to make sure that the enemy stays frozen in the air. And now, this is really important. So, like I said, you use the Heavy Rain Blades, and now Vergil is going to be sheathing his sword after Rapid Slash. You guys already know this, we've been over this a billion times, but when Vergil is sheathing his sword, especially after Rapid Slash, he does not react to melee commands. You could be mashing the attack button, he will not react to anything until he is done sheathing his sword. But the Doppelganger will. Alright, and this is incredibly important. So while Vergil is sheathing his sword after Rapid Slash, you want the following to happen. You essentially want the Doppelganger to use Yamato Combo C, and you want Vergil to use Yamato Combo B. And Vergil will blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger with the last hit of Yamato Combo B, and the Doppelganger will catch the enemy with the Slash Barrage of Yamato Combo C. Now, do you guys remember the Hell Combo? In the Hell Combo, we had the Doppelganger using Yamato Combo B to blow the enemy away towards Vergil, and then Vergil catches the enemy with the Slash Barrage of Yamato Combo C. Here, it's an Uno reverse. Basically, Vergil is the one who uses Yamato Combo B to blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, who catches the enemy with the Slash Barrage of Yamato Combo C. So the roles have been reversed in this combo, or well, in this setup. So as you guys already know, Yamato Combo C is you press the attack button 4 times, then you make a pause, and then you continue to mash. So when you press the attack button 4 times, Vergil does the first 4 hits of Yamato Combo C, then you make a pause, and when you resume mashing, or while you press the attack button 1 more time, Vergil will use the Slash Barrage, right? And that's it. Yamato Combo B, however, is you press the attack button twice, not 4 times, but twice, so attack button, and then you make a pause, and then you press the attack button 1 more time. Okay, so that's how it works. So how exactly does this work? How exactly does this apply to this setup? It's incredibly simple. So like I said, Vergil doesn't react to melee commands when he's sheathing his sword after Rapid Slash. So when you cut through the enemy with Rapid Slash and use the Heavy Rain Blades, you wait a little, you wait for Vergil to start sheathing his sword, and before he's done sheathing his sword, you press the attack button 2 times, about 2 times. This will cause the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo C. And now, you press the attack button 2 more times. This will cause the Doppelganger to use the 3rd and 4th hit of Yamato Combo C, but it will cause Vergil to use the 1st and 2nd hit of Yamato Combo B. Because by the time this has happened, Vergil has already finished sheathing his sword, and he can finally react to your melee commands. And he only reacts to you pressing the attack button twice. So when you make the pause now, Vergil will make the pause after the second hit of Yamato Combo B, but the Doppelganger, the pause that you make, is after the fourth hit of Yamato Combo C. And then what you gotta do is, you press the attack button one more time. This causes Vergil to use the final hit of Yamato Combo B, and the Doppelganger to use the / barrage of Yamato Combo C. But wait, that's not exactly how it works. So there's something I omitted here. So, like I said, let's go over this again. You cut through the enemy with rapid slash, use the heavy rain blades. You wait a little for Vergil to start sheathing his sword, and now you press the attack button about 4 times, right? And you make a pause. The Doppelganger uses the first 4 hits of Yamato Combo C. Vergil uses the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo B, because he doesn't react to the first 2 times you press the attack button, because he was still sheathing his sword. He only reacted to you pressing the attack button the 3rd and 4th time. So, again, you press the attack button 4 times, the Doppelganger uses the 4 hits of Yamato Combo C, Vergil uses the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo B. Now you make a pause, which is required, but now, alright, this is really important, you let go of the lock-on, and you start holding left. And now, you press the attack button one more time, and you hold it, okay? This will cause Vergil to use the final hit of Yamato Combo B, and the Doppelganger to use the / barrage of Yamato Combo C. And now you lock on again. Now that the Doppelganger has finished the / flurry, and he's blown the enemy away with Yamato Combo C, you still hold the attack button, and just as Vergil is about to sheath his sword, when the click happens, you release the attack button, and Vergil will do the perfect judgment cut. One thing that's incredibly important that you've probably noticed, and I can't believe I haven't mentioned it yet, is that after the Doppelganger has blown the enemy away with the final hit of Yamato Combo C, the enemy gets launched into the air for some reason, and you might be wondering why that is. And no, it has nothing to do with the Doppelganger, and it has everything to do with Vergil and Yamato Combo B. As you guys already know, Yamato Combo B is attack button, pause, and then you press the attack button. In this case, you gotta hold it, but that's irrelevant. And when Vergil does the 3rd hit of Yamato Combo B, this one Mirage Blade will embed itself into the enemy. And when Vergil is done sheathing his sword, after the end of Yamato Combo B, this Mirage Blade will launch the enemy into the air. It'll propel the enemy into the air, but only when Vergil is done sheathing his sword, when you hear the click. We had something similar, or well, identical, happen with the Void combo. Basically, we use Yamato Combo B, and, this one Mirage Blade embeds itself into the enemy. We use it again, blah, 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 and when Vergil sheathes his sword after the last hit of Yamato Combo B, the Mirage Blade that has been embedded into the enemy launches the enemy into the air. So that's exactly what happens here. Basically, you hold the attack button during the final hit of Yamato Combo B, and when Vergil clicks, when he is done sheathing his sword, the Mirage Blade will launch the enemy into the air, and at this point you let go of the attack button so that Vergil can use this perfect judgment cut. At this point, you use Judgment Cut End, and you also use the Blistering Blades to make sure the enemy doesn't fall to the ground. And that is the end of the Rose combo. So, how exactly does this work? It's incredibly simple. You might be thinking, why do I have to let go of the lock-on and press and hold left after this pause? Like, what gives? Why do I gotta let go of the lock-on and hold left? It's so that the Doppelganger can face left. You don't want the Doppelganger to face the enemy, because if the Doppelganger faces the enemy, he will hit the enemy with the / barrage head on. You want him to turn around, right? So that when Vergil uses the final hit of Yamato Combo B, he blows the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, and the Doppelganger hits them like this. And then you can lock on. Now you might be thinking, why do I gotta hold the attack button while using the final hit of Yamato combo B / C? It's so that you can use this perfect judgment cut. So when you press and hold the attack button and you release it at the right time, that will trigger a perfect judgment cut. After Yamato combo B, right, when you use the last hit of Yamato combo B, the third one, it's like attack button, pause, and then you hold the attack button, and you only release it when the sword clicks, when it hits the scabbard. That will trigger a perfect judgment cut. And after this, you can use Judgment Cut and Blistering Blades, whatever. So this is how it works. This is why you gotta let go of the lock-on and press and hold left during the pause, right? Just before the final hit of Yamato combo B. Alright, so now let's talk about all the mistakes you can make and all the issues you can encounter in this combo. So, sometimes the Doppelganger will simply ghost you. This happened only a handful of times, like, it's not even something worth including, but whatever. Sometimes he ghosts your inputs, and he doesn't even use aerial rave, so not really all that important. Sometimes I would accidentally use air trick instead of trick up, and this would also cause Vergil and the Doppelganger to teleport to where the enemy is, because the Doppelganger follows you if you use air trick. Air trick is locking on and pressing the trick button, but you gotta let go of the lock on during this setup and use trick up. This is why you gotta let go of the lock on immediately after Rising Star, before Starfall. It's way easier that way, okay? Really simple stuff. Sometimes I would use this double Starfall, and I don't know what the hell this is. Like, I use Starfall, and it's like I use trick up, but barely, and then I continue with Starfall. How the... what? I literally have no idea what this is, but it has happened multiple times. This is what happens when you use a normal taunt instead of the S-rank air taunt. This happens when you don't switch to the Yamato or the Mirage Edge when using the air taunt. So like I said, you can only use the S-rank air taunt if you switch to the Mirage Edge or the Yamato. If you have Beowulf equipped and you try to use the air taunt, you will use the normal air taunt, and this will not work, okay? So, like I said, I can do this, and in the original combo, this is what I did, but that's because I use the trainer, I use the taunt selector that enables me to use the S-rank air taunt even with Beowulf. But you can see that I can do it even without it. It just kind of facilitates things, so you don't have to worry about pressing more things than you should, but you know, switching to the Yamato or the Mirage Edge, it's like really simple stuff. It only requires the one press of your button, so yeah. Sometimes the Doppelganger uses aerial cleave. This only happened during the beginning phases of me trying this setup, and how do I put this? I think the reason this happens is very simple. I wasn't mashing enough. So I press the attack button 2 to 3 times, the Doppelganger uses the first 2 hits of aerial rave, and then I immediately use air stinger, right, which is right plus attack button. And the Doppelganger, who is on the right side, he's on the right side in midair, and he can only use the Yamato. When you press right plus attack button on the right side in the air with the Yamato, that is aerial cleave. And I have to press right plus attack button so that Vergil can use air stinger, right? And the Doppelganger reacts to that. So I should have pressed the attack button at least 1 more time or 2 more times during the air taunt before using air stinger. This is essentially what happened. And it's not very frequent, but when I was starting this setup, it was. Sometimes this would happen, and I'm not sure how I would describe this. The only way I can describe this is I used air stinger way too late. So as you can see, the Doppelganger uses aerial rave A, and he blows the enemy away before I can actually, well, use air stinger, as you can see here. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is just all about me using air stinger way too late. Or another thing, you can notice, you have probably noticed that in all of these instances, all these failed attempts, what happens is I summon the Doppelganger normally. I don't, use enemy step and let go of the lock-on and press forward while summoning the Doppelganger. I am facing the enemy. So maybe this is why it happens. Maybe that's why all this happens. Maybe it has nothing to do with me using Air Stinger way too late, but I do think that's the problem here. I think it's the fact that I'm using Air Stinger way too late. So make sure you use Air Stinger really fast. For this entire setup, you gotta be blistering, you gotta be insanely fast, and you gotta have perfect, immaculate timing. In these instances, you can see the same thing. I was too late in using Air Stinger, but I did hit the enemy, but I didn't blow them away towards the Doppelganger, because they kind of hit this invisible wall. Air Stinger has a weird hitbox, so this still falls under the same category of me using Air Stinger way too late. You gotta be real fast. Now, this one is really interesting, because it used to happen a lot, So what I think happened here was I canceled Trick Up with the air taunt way too late, and as a result, I was too close to the ground. So when I used Air Stinger, I did blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, and I did catch the enemy with the Doppelganger. However, when I pressed the attack button and tried to use Starfall with Beowulf, I wasn't high up enough in the air to even use Starfall. I was too close to the ground, so the game just brought me back to the ground, and when I pressed the attack button, Vergil used the first hit of Beowulf combo A, because I was way too close to the ground. This used to happen quite a lot, not gonna lie. What about this, though? In all of these instances, I wasn't too close to the ground. I used Starfall, but when I pressed back plus forward plus attack button to use kick 13, what ended up happening was, instead of using kick 13, Vergil used the first hit of Beowulf combo A. I don't know why, but this was incredibly frequent, and I'm almost certain that this is either A, a camera issue, or B, me inputting back plus forward before Vergil actually hit the ground with Starfall. My money's on that. I can't see my controls here because I was mostly attempting this combo outside of the void, but I am sure that I actually pressed back before I hit the ground with Starfall, and then I ended up pressing forward plus attack button, and this is why this happened. Or it could be a camera issue, I couldn't tell you. But sometimes, and this was also incredibly frequent, I would use Lunar Phase instead of kick 13. And this is definitely me inputting back before hitting the ground. So Lunar Phase is, when the enemy's in front of you, it's forward plus attack button, right? It's forward plus attack button. And if the enemy is to your right, then it's right plus attack button. But kick 13 is back plus forward plus attack button, or left plus right plus attack button. This means, I'm pretty sure, that I pressed back before hitting the ground with Starfall, and then I pressed right plus attack button when I was on the ground, which prompted Vergil to use Lunar Phase instead of kick 13. Or, again, it could be a camera issue. Sometimes Vergil would use the air taunt, but he wouldn't phase the enemy, so he would use it in the other direction, like a reverse air taunt. This happens, I think, when you're not locked on while using the air taunt. I don't think this taunt requires you to be locked on. So I would use Trick Up and immediately use the air taunt before locking on. So yeah, this happened quite a few times, not gonna lie, because I was overwhelmed by the amount of things you gotta press during this setup. Sometimes the Doppelganger would use Aerial Rave A instead of Aerial Rave B. As you guys already know, Aerial Rave A is mashing the attack button like a maniac, but Aerial Rave B is you press the attack button 2 to 3 times so that Vergil can use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, and then you make a pause, and then you resume mashing. What happened in every single one of these instances was I used Starfall and I pressed the attack button 2 to 3 times, and the Doppelganger did the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, and then I immediately used kick 13 without making any pause, right? And the Doppelganger would end up using Aerial Rave A instead of B. So definitely make sure the pause you make is long enough. So here the pause was either non-existent or way too short. Sometimes, and this was incredibly frequent, one of the most frequent issues, Sometimes the Doppelganger would not be able to connect aerial rave B. So let me explain how that works. Basically, here for example, I use Air Stinger and I blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, and I try to catch the enemy with the first 2 hits of the Doppelganger's aerial rave B, but apparently I started mashing way too late, and the enemy flew past the Doppelganger. I should have pressed it earlier, but you know, I don't think this was a timing issue. I genuinely think I pressed it in time. I just think the enemy was too low compared to the Doppelganger, and that's why this happened. I don't know, I mean, I really couldn't tell you. In this example, however, you can see how I use Air Stinger and I blow the enemy away, but he is definitely way too low compared to the Doppelganger. And I think the reason this happened was because I canceled Trick Up and used Air Stinger while being too close to the ground. And then the enemy was also closer to the ground, and he went underneath the Doppelganger, basically. And you can see this happen here as well. So there are multiple examples where I'm too close to the ground, and when I blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger with Air Stinger, they fly underneath the Doppelganger, basically, and there's no way. So I don't think this is a timing thing. This is not me inputting the first 2 hits of the Doppelganger's aerial rave B way too late. I do it in time, but the Doppelganger, like the enemy, is way too low, and the Doppel can't make contact with the enemy, so yeah. Now, this is similar. Basically, the same thing happens. The Doppelganger cannot connect aerial rave B, like the first 2 hits, but the reason it happens here is because I think I summon the Doppelganger normally without using enemy step and holding forward plus summoning the Doppelganger. So I think this is the main reason why you have to summon the Doppelganger specially in that way, by using enemy step and holding forward and letting go of the lock-on. Because if you do it normally, what happens is when Vergil blows the enemy away towards the Doppelganger with Air Stinger, you can't, like, he will fly away, you know? It doesn't matter what you do. Of course, there is the possibility that I didn't start mashing in time. This is definitely something that's possible. Like, you can fail to connect the first 2 hits of the Doppelganger's aerial rave B because you don't start mashing in time. But I genuinely believe that here it's a mix of both. I don't start mashing in time, plus, you know, it's the fact that I summon the Doppelganger normally. Sometimes the Doppelganger will catch the enemy, but very half-assedly, and he will drop the enemy during aerial rave B, so during the roulette spin usually. Now, this can happen for multiple reasons. In the first example, I think this happened because the enemy was kind of far away from the Doppelganger. You can see that the second hit of aerial rave B didn't even connect. So they were too far away, and this means that I didn't start mashing in time because the enemy fell to the ground before the roulette spin. In the second example, you can see how I use Air Stinger and I, you know, basically connect with the Doppelganger, but the enemy falls regardless because I guess the pause was too long or something. I couldn't tell you. There are multiple examples here. Here, for example, the enemy was too high up compared to the Doppelganger, and then when I try to use this, the Doppelganger simply failed. I don't know what, but this can definitely happen for different reasons. Like, sometimes the Doppelganger will simply ignore you, and he will delay the roulette spin, but what matters is this is a frequent mistake. Now, this is possibly the most, okay, not the most, but probably one of the most frequent issues you can experience during this setup. So, basically, the last hit of the Doppelganger's aerial rave B disconnects, and it disconnects, I would say, because the enemy is way, way too high up compared to the Doppelganger. So sometimes they'll be too low, they'll go underneath them, but here it's because they're too high up in the air. And I genuinely don't think this has anything to do with when I start mashing. I did not start mashing too early, I did not start mashing too late. If I had started mashing later, I think the enemy would have simply flown away without the Doppelganger even touching them. This has to do, I would say, with me using Air Stinger too early. Believe it or not, this is a possibility. So when I use Air Stinger, the enemy is kind of above Vergil. They're not on the same altitude. So then, when I catch the enemy with the first 2 hits of the Doppelganger's Aerial Rave B, they're too high up. And look, like, he drops the final hit of Aerial Rave B because the enemy is way higher up in the air than the Doppelganger. And this is all, in all these instances, I would say this is because I used Air Stinger too early, while the Doppelganger, like, while the enemy was too high up in the air. I should have waited for the enemy to somehow lose some altitude before blowing the enemy away. However, there are instances where this is complete BS. For example, this instance right here that you can see, the Doppelganger and the enemy were on the same exact altitude, I would say. I didn't do it too early or too late, yet the final hit of the Doppelganger's Aerial Rave B still disconnected. It's BS, bro. Look at this. Look at this. So yeah, it can happen even if you do everything perfectly. I really gotta emphasize just how incredibly difficult this is. Like, this may seem like, haha, this guy's stupid. How can he make these mistakes? Brother, this setup requires you to press so many things at once, and it is pure instinct, ultra instinct. You need to be able to gauge when to use trick up, when to cancel it with the air taunt, when to use the Air Stinger, not too late, not too early, when to start mashing, how close you are to the ground. You gotta calculate everything, and it's mostly just, it's not even muscle memory, it's just instinct. It's getting the feeling for it. Like I said, sometimes you can just start mashing way too late, and then this happens, you know, like the Doppelganger can't catch the enemy with Aerial Rave B properly, because I didn't start mashing in time. You have no idea. Like, I had to practice this setup in 0.8% turbo 99% of the time. It's really, like, I can do it now in normal speed, and that's how I did it in the original combo, but for the most part, I was barely able to do it in 0.8% turbo. You gotta practice in 0.8%. I recommend that. Actually, this might be the most frequent issue I've experienced. I don't know. It's like up there. I don't know. What happens here is Rising Sun disconnects. Either doesn't connect or doesn't even reach the enemy. By Rising Sun, I mean the last 2 launching kicks of Kick 13. It used to be a move back in DMC3. It was called Rising Sun. So the final 2 kicks, the launching kicks of Kick 13, don't even reach the enemy. Why does this happen? It depends, but in 90% of these cases, what happens, I think, is I use Air Stinger, and I blow the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, and when I use Starfall, I was too close to the ground before using Starfall, so I didn't cover enough ground. Starfall didn't take me far enough. It didn't take me close enough to the enemy. Because when I used Starfall, I was too close to the ground, basically. And this might have to do with when I canceled the trick up thing with the air taunt and when I used Air Stinger. You can see this with like in a lot of these examples. Like, I use trick up and I cancel with the air taunt. I use Air Stinger and I blow the enemy away, and then I use Starfall, but look, like, it barely takes me a few millimeters away from my initial position. So when I use Kick 13, I'm just too far away from the enemy. I just can't reach them. And this is because I was too close to the ground before using Starfall. But in some cases, in some instances, I am close enough to the enemy, but Vergil, even though I am locked on, just completely hits the air, hits the opposite direction instead of hitting the enemy with the final 2 hits, the final 2 kicks. I don't know how to explain that, I can't account for that, but I sure as hell can account for all these other instances where Starfall simply doesn't take me close enough to the enemy. Like I said, sometimes the other thing can happen, like Rising Sun can disconnect in different ways, but basically, most of the time, I just can't reach the enemy because Starfall doesn't take me close enough, or well, far enough, if you know what I mean. And it's really weird. It's really stupid. And you cannot properly gauge this, usually. It is just incredibly frustrating. It's something that, like, it's like everything looks perfect, but this kills you. It's just so incredibly annoying beyond words, beyond belief. I cannot, man. It's so stupid. Like, it feels like it should have worked, but it doesn't. And you can't really do anything about it. Okay, so this one is incredibly important. This one happened more times than it should have, and I really gotta warn you. This is something that I said during the analysis, that I would come back to this. So, as you guys already know, right, when you use Starfall, you press the attack button 2 to 3 times so that the Doppelganger can use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. And then you make a pause. And now, you use Kick 13. But you want the version of Kick 13 where you press back plus forward and you hold the attack button so that Vergil can use those 2 launching kicks. If you don't hold the attack button, Vergil will use the regular Kick 13 with no launcher, okay? But you also have to mash during Kick 13 so that the Doppelganger can use the rest of Aerial Rave B and pin the enemy to the ground. So what happened in all these instances, you can see that right here, luckily I did it in the void at least a few times, is I press back plus forward plus attack button, and I mash it only twice or thrice. I press the attack button 2 to 3 times, and then I immediately start holding the attack button. As a result, what ended up happening was the Doppelganger ended up using the roulette spin, but he didn't use the final hit of Aerial Rave B to pin the enemy to the ground. This is because I wasn't mashing enough. I started holding the attack button too early. Right? You gotta mash the attack button more, like 4 to 5 to 6 times before holding the attack button, right? You gotta start holding it at some point, but here I started holding it too early. I only pressed the attack button 2 to 3 times, like back plus forward plus attack button plus attack button. So, yeah, this can definitely happen. Make sure you don't make this mistake. Make sure you mash the attack button during Kick 13. Conversely, however, you can make the opposite thing happen. Like, you can make a different mistake where here I press back plus forward and I mash the attack button and I keep mashing it, and then I stop. I don't hold the attack button, and Vergil ends up using the normal Kick 13 instead of the one with the 2 launching kicks. Either because I didn't hold the attack button, or I started holding it too late. This can definitely happen, and it happened way more times than it should have, but this is clearly a mistake on my part. You gotta mash the attack button a few times, and then at some point you gotta hold the attack button so that Vergil can use the launching kicks of Kick 13. In the original analysis, the way I did it was I pressed back plus forward, and then I mashed the attack button 5 times, and then I started holding the attack button, right? So you gotta start holding the attack button. If you look at my analysis, I started holding the attack button around the time Vergil's Doppelganger was about to be done with the roulette spin, but way before the last hit of Aerial Rave B, right? So this is really important. Make sure that you mash the attack button, and that you don't just start holding the attack button way too early, otherwise the Doppelganger won't use the final hit of Aerial Rave B. But if you don't hold the attack button in time, Vergil won't use the 2 launching kicks of Kick 13. So again, it's all about that muscle memory. Sometimes, though, the Doppelganger would end up facing Vergil and the enemy. This happens, I guess, because, you know, I wouldn't say it's because I pressed the attack button and I caught the enemy too early with the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. I would say it just happened, you know. Don't let this phase you, though. The combo can work perfectly fine even with this. It's just my OCD. In fact, this might even look cooler to some people, so don't let this phase you. Sometimes, though, Vergil will go spastic, usually as a result of this. However, don't let this deter you from, well, continuing the combo, because this can also work perfectly fine. It's just that I have OCD and I care a lot about visuals, and I just feel like it looks stupid when Vergil just kicks all around him, like does a 360. So this can definitely happen, and it usually happens because the doppelganger is facing the enemy, right? And Vergil just does this in the end. But like I said, really not a problem. Sometimes, and believe it or not, this happened at least 7 times. Like, I wasn't counting, but, you know, sometimes they do everything perfectly, but Lunar phase disconnects. And the reason this happens, I think, is because I was too far away from the enemy. I did catch them with kick 13, but only barely. So when I used Lunar Phase, I didn't get to actually connect. I didn't get to graze the enemy because there was too much distance. There was too much of a gap, too big of a gap between Vergil and the enemy. You could chalk this up to one of those previous issues. I was way too close to the ground and Starfall didn't take me close enough to the enemy. As a result, I did manage to somehow connect the Rising Sun kicks, but only barely. Only barely. I know for a fact that I missed something. Something important. I don't know, though. But these are most of the issues and mistakes that you can encounter and make during this setup. It is, and I cannot stress this enough, incredibly timing intensive, and it requires you to have that feel. I remember even Byanyo and Akuma, like, we were in a Discord call, and, like, I asked him to do it, and even he, like, couldn't do it immediately, right? So, it definitely requires some practice, and I would recommend practicing this in 0.8% turbo, maybe even 0.6 until you get it down, and you will, believe me, because I can do it semi-regularly now. So during the second setup, the one with kick 13, I would say that there are only 2 issues you can experience here. Like, 2 mistakes that you can make. And the first one is, you cancel Starfall with Trick down way too late. And as a result, when you use kick 13, Vergil kind of hits the enemy like this, and even though it can work, it looks ridiculous. And sometimes it literally won't even work. Like, it just looks stupid. But most of the time it does work. But as you can see, it just looks ridiculous. So when you use Starfall, make sure to almost immediately cancel it with Trig down and then use Kick 13. Otherwise, Vergil will be way too close to the enemy, and, you know, this will happen. You get what I'm trying to say. Like, you can see this here. So, canceling Starfall too late with Trig down is a no-no. However, believe it or not, this might be even worse. Sometimes you can cancel Starfall with Trig down way too early. So here I use Starfall, and before I even started, I immediately cancel it with Trig down. So when I use Kick 13, I'm too far away from the enemy, and I cannot even catch them. Sometimes I can barely catch them, but usually not. So, yeah. Make sure that you know exactly when to cancel Starfall with Trig down. Don't do it too early, otherwise you'll be too far away from the enemy and you won't be able to hit them and connect Kick 13. But definitely don't do it too late either, because then it'll become spastic. But if you don't mind that, that's okay. Alright, so during the third setup, there were 2 issues that I would experience constantly. And the first one I can get out of the way right now. So, like I said, when you use Starfall, right, you press the attack button once, and the Doppelganger uses the roulette spin of Aerial Rave 2, which is just 1 hit. And now you hit the ground, and what I would do is, immediately after hitting the ground, I would input Void Slash, which is back plus forward plus attack button. This would cause Vergil to use Void Slash, and the Doppelganger to use the final hit of, well, Aerial Rave B. However, if you do this, Vergil will end up using Void Slash way too early, before the Doppelganger can pin the enemy to the ground. And why is that? It's incredibly simple. It's because after using Starfall, you're supposed to press the attack button 1 more time immediately after hitting the ground with Starfall, and then you're supposed to press back plus forward plus attack button. So essentially, you use Starfall, the Doppelganger uses the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B, and then when you hit the ground, you press the attack button 1 more time immediately. and the Doppelganger will use the final hit of Aerial Rave B. And now you input Void Slash. So you don't input Void Slash immediately after hitting the ground, you press the attack button one more time. Vergil will not react to this because, you know, Starfall has these recovery frames. You're not going to be able to just, like, you can hit the ground with Starfall and press the attack button one time, Vergil will not react to that. But if you press it 2 to 3 times, he will. Okay? So this is essentially what happens. All you gotta do is, you press the attack button once, Vergil uses Starfall. The moment you hit the ground, you press the attack button one more time, so that the Doppelganger can use the final hit of Aerial Rave B, and then you switch to the Yamato, and you press back plus forward plus attack button to input Void Slash. Alright? This is incredibly simple, and for some reason, this was a mistake that I would constantly make when I was starting the combo. But now we have the most frequent mistake that you can make during this setup. And I'm not exactly sure, you know, this is one of those issues where every single time I think to myself, I figured this out, I figured it out, but then it's like, no, I didn't. So I'm gonna propose 2 theories. So the mistake in question is, I use Void Slash, and I don't think I use it too early, but I am too far away from the enemy for Void Slash to connect. Alright? This is something that can definitely happen, and it is the most frequent mistake you can make during this setup. Now, how do you circumvent this? To my knowledge, and again, this is not 1,000,000,000% sure, there are 2 ways. Okay? 2 ways. Number 1, after you summon the Doppelganger and use Trick Up, you wait a little before using Air Stinger. You wait a fraction of a second for the enemy to, like, start losing a little bit of altitude. Not really, it's not even going to be noticeable. But wait a fraction of a second after summoning the Doppelganger and before using Trick Up. And the second thing, the most important thing, is after using Air Stinger, right? Before using Starfall, you make sure the pause is really long, so that Vergil can lose some altitude, basically. And only then are you allowed to use Starfall. I have these, like, comparison videos here. You can't really see them unless you slow them down or you slow the video down to, like, 0.25% speed, but I noticed that if I use Starfall too early, like I use Air Stinger, and then I don't make that long of a pause and I immediately use Starfall, there is a 90% chance that in the end I will be too far away from the enemy and I would not be able to connect Void Slash, alright? This happens, like I even measured it here, so usually, the way it works is, if you don't make a pause that is long enough before Starfall, it's usually a 0.74 second long pause, you know? So 0.7475 seconds, that is not enough. Usually, in 90% of these examples, you can see 7 examples where the pause I made was 0.75 seconds. And the combo failed. You know, I was too far away from the enemy. Void Slash did not connect. However, in almost all of the instances where I was successful, the pause I made was 0.84 seconds long, or 0.77, right? So, I noticed that the pause you gotta make before Starfall needs to be 0.77 or 0.83, 85 seconds long. And this was like foolproof. I was sure that this was all there was to it. Until I experienced a few instances where the pause I made was 0.83 or 0.84 seconds, but it still failed, right? And then I was like, alright, I think, yes, you definitely need to make an incredibly long pause before starfall. But the other thing you also gotta do, from like the way I see it, is you also gotta wait a little before using trick up. So wait a little before trick up and air stinger, and wait a long time. Make a very long pause before starfall. Not too long, otherwise the doppelganger will reset area rave B, but definitely make sure that the pause you make is long, alright? Really long. It's an altitude thing the way I see it, because altitude and distance are relative. Like, they are intertwined. You want Vergil to be very close to the enemy. Maybe you might also want to delay Void Slash, but like I said, this is not about using Void Slash too early. This is about the distance, the way I see it. You're not able to catch the enemy with Void Slash, because you're too far away from the enemy. Starfall sent you way too far. So, yeah, definitely something to pay attention to. Alright, so let's move on to the final part of this combo and all the mistakes you can make there. So, sometimes I would end up not releasing the lock-on. Like I said, you have to release the lock-on at some point and press and hold left so that the doppelganger can face left. If you don't let go of the lock-on, and if you don't press and hold left, the doppelganger will face the enemy and he will hit them with the slash barrage head on. You don't want this, and this is not even like a mistake. I only did this like once when I was like literally attempting this setup for the very first time. So, yeah, definitely not something you'll experience, you know, once you've gotten accustomed to the setup, so. Here you can see how I started mashing only after Vergil was completely done sheathing his sword, and as a result, the Doppelganger and Vergil were completely in sync, and they used Yamato combo C together. Obviously, you can't do that. You need to make use of the fact that Vergil cannot react to melee commands while sheathing his sword after Rapid Slash. You need to make use of this so you can press the attack button 2 to 3 times so that the Doppelganger can use the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo C before Vergil can start Yamato Combo B. This is the whole point. Of course, this, too, only happened during the first few attempts of, you know, me doing this setup for the very first time, so don't worry about it. Here, the pause I made after the second hit of, you know, Yamato Combo B wasn't long enough, so Vergil ended up using Yamato Combo A, or well, C, doesn't really matter. He used the third and fourth hit. So the pause I made was not long enough. Make sure the pause you make is long enough. Otherwise, this will happen. Here you can see how I started mashing way too early, or rather, way too fast. I pressed the attack button 7 times instead of 4 to 5 times. And as a result, the Doppelganger ended up using Yamato Combo A instead of Yamato Combo C. Again, just like with the other 2 to 3 mistakes, this only happened during the first, like, initial phases of me trying this setup for the very first time, right? This will not happen to you if you know what you're doing. Sometimes I would end up using a regular judgment cut, so normal judgment cut. As you guys already know, during the last hit of Yamato Combo B, you're supposed to press and hold the attack button, and when Vergil finally sheathes his sword, like, you see the click, you see the spark, his sword hits the scabbard, at that exact moment, you're supposed to let go of the attack button if you want to use a perfect judgment cut. If you're a few frames too late, Vergil will use a regular judgment cut, and it's game over. Combo failed, you know? So, make sure your timing is perfect. This is really not difficult if you have any experience with Vergil. And we also have this. This is an issue. I'm not sure if I can call it a mistake, but this is probably the most frequent thing that will happen to you in this setup. And again, it's not incredibly frequent. It's really not. But it can happen. And funnily enough, this same thing happened with the Hell combo, where it was the other way around, where Vergil was the one using Yamato Combo C. So basically what happens here is Vergil blows the enemy away towards the Doppelganger, and the Doppelganger does Yamato combo C, and the slash barrage, like the back hits, keep the enemy, like, you know, they suspend them like this, like the enemy is behind the Doppelganger, and you can just see what I mean. Like, it can still work, but it looks absolutely ridiculous. I would never accept this. This happened a lot, unfortunately, and I don't even know what it depends on. Like, it's not like you can control the distance between Vergil and the Doppelganger. Maybe it has to do with the enemy's altitude before you use the heavy rain blades, but I highly doubt it. Still, this is something can happen. And now, finally, you already know, we have the age-old mistake. You already know what's gonna happen. Air trick instead of judgment cut end. So I press forward plus trick button plus attack button, but instead of using judgment cut end, Vergil uses air trick and he teleports to where the enemy is. By far the most frequent mistake you can make, the most frequent issue you can experience during the last setup. More frequent than anything else. And when you have a combo like this that has a setup as funky as the first one, and you finally get to the end, and this happens, you kind of want to pull all your hair out, you know? But anyway, that's about all I have to say regarding this combo. It's one of my favorite combos. I will admit it does have some redundancies. Like I said, the whole thing where I use, you know, Lunar, Phase, and then Helmbreaker, and then Million Stab, and then Rising Star. I could have just as easily, you know, summoned the Doppelganger immediately after the first kick 13. I think that could have worked, I'm pretty sure, but it's like, whatever. Another thing that might kind of bug some people who are perfectionists and elitists, and I will talk about these people in a video that I plan to make very soon after the storm analysis, the storm combo analysis. Some people might get bugged by the fact that the second and third setup are pretty similar. It is the same principle. You know, the Doppelganger uses Aerial Rave B, Vergil uses Air Stinger. The only difference is, you know, in the second setup, it's Kick 13, and in the third setup, it's Void Slash. Very similar setups, and people might get the ick, you know, they might get a little when they see that I deactivate the Doppelganger twice only to resummon him. I can totally see why somebody would be bothered by this. In a lot of my combos, I have these, this isn't even filler, this is kind of a redundancy in a way, where I will, you know, deactivate the Doppelganger only to immediately summon him again. And this might create a pause that some people find unsightly. I myself, even though I have insane OCD when it comes to DMC combos, I myself personally don't mind this. I don't mind giving myself leeway when it comes to combos, and I personally don't believe that that really destroys the flow, at least not here. I think the setups that are used in this combo are all great, especially the first and the last one, and I do think that it flows in a meaningful way. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it is definitely one of my favorite combos, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm going to analyze the Storm combo next. It's going to be a doozy. I can't wait to analyze that combo. And after that, I will make a special video. So yeah, see ya, peace out, and have a wonderful day.